Ever walked by a classroom and seen, like, the Ten Commandments framed on the wall?
Yeah.
It's pretty common, right?
Yeah.
It seems straightforward enough. Some people find it comforting. But what if I told you those 10, like, seemingly simple rules, they've actually sparked this whole theological debate.
Right.
And it goes way beyond just, like, the legal arguments.
See, that's what makes this deep dive so fascinating, right?
Yeah.
Like looking at how something is, seemingly basic as displaying the Ten Commandments can bring up these really complex questions about faith, about grace, about what it actually means to live as a Christian.
Okay, so to help us unpack all of this, we're going to this article from religiousliberty.tv.
Yeah.
It's called Mandated Display of 10 Commandments, Does It Miss the Gospel's Heart?
Can't you right?
So it digs into a Louisiana law. Basically, this law says public schools, they have to display the 10 Commandments in classrooms. But, and this is important, we're not getting bogged down in the legal stuff here.
Okay.
We're not talking separation of church and state.
Yeah.
We're going deeper, straight to the theological heart of it all.
Because it really comes down to this. Is just focusing on the rules, is that really what being a Christian is all about?
Which brings us to this whole idea of legalism. The article spends a good chunk of time breaking down this concept. So, in a nutshell, what is legalism?
Basically, it's this idea that you earn God's favor by perfectly following all the rules.
Oh.
Like you got to check off all the boxes on this divine to-do list rather than having this real, genuine relationship with him.
So it's almost like approaching faith like a checklist.
Well-
Do this, don't do that. And it makes me think of those people who are, always going on about their good deeds. But when you look closer, their hearts aren't really in it. It's more about appearances than genuine compassion.
Yeah. And the article makes this really interesting comparison between modern-day legalism and the Pharisees. Remember them?
Mm-hmm.
The religious leaders. Jesus was always challenging.
Oh, yeah.
They were obsessed with appearing pious, following every single rule to the letter.
Yeah.
But Jesus criticized them for lacking genuine internal change and love.
So much for good intentions, right? It's like the article suggesting that if we only focus on the 10 Commandments, without the full context of faith, it could actually lead to that same kind of hypocrisy.
It's a slippery slope, for
Yeah.
sure. I mean, the 10 Commandments, they definitely provide a moral framework. That's important. But the article's point is that they don't represent the whole Christian faith.
Right.
For Christians, the commandments should act like a mirror.
Okay.
They show us our need for God's grace, not our ability to be good enough on our own.
So it's not about using the commandments as some kind of measuring stick to prove how righteous we are?
Exactly.
Okay. So are we saying the 10 Commandments are bad? Because, let's be real, most of them, don't steal or don't murder, seem like pretty solid ethical principles.
No, not at all. The point isn't to throw out the commandments completely. They definitely form a basis for morality, principles that you often even see reflected in secular law, right?
Right.
But the article is urging caution against making them the end-all, be-all of Christian faith.
So we've established that this is way more nuanced than it might seem at first glance. We can't just slap the 10 Commandments on a wall without thinking about the implications, right?
Right.
About how too much emphasis on the rules can actually hurt our relationship with God. But, okay, the article doesn't just leave us with this critique of legalism.
No. Thus?
It goes on to explore the dangers. And more importantly, it highlights that there's a powerful alternative. And that alternative is a gospel message itself.
Yeah, you're right. It doesn't just stop at a critique of legalism. It actually digs into what are the possible downsides?
Yeah.
What are the dangers of approaching faith in this way?
Okay, so it gets real deep, real fast, huh?
Yeah.
So what's danger number one? What do we need to watch out for?
So the first danger zone the article points out is this whole thing of putting rules ahead of relationships.
Okay.
It's saying legalism can kind of trick us.
Yeah.
We get so caught up in checking off all the religious to-dos that we forget about actually nurturing a genuine connection with God.
So instead of actually spending time with your best friend, you just send them a birthday text every year.
Exactly.
You check the box, right?
Okay.
Technically. But it just feels kind of empty.
Totally.
Right?
It's you're missing the whole point of friendship, right? That
Yeah.
genuine connection.
Exactly.
And in a way, that's what legalism can do to faith, right?
Yeah.
It reduces it down to this transaction.
Yeah.
Here are your obligations, now do them. Instead of this vibrant, alive, dynamic relationship that's built on actual love, trust, that real connection.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense. And that actually leads perfectly into the second danger zone the article brings up, which is this difference between outward actions versus real internal change.
Yes.
It's saying true faith isn't just about going through the motions,
Well,
right?
actually.
It's about letting God work on us from the inside out.
Exactly. Think of it this way. You could clean your house,
Right.
like really scrub it down, make it spotless, but you're only doing it because company's coming over.
Right.
Or you could, keep your space clean and organized because you genuinely enjoy it. It brings you peace. It brings you order.
Right.
One is all at appearances, right?
Right.
What are other people going to think?
Right. Right.
But the other, that's about a real deep internal shift.
Okay, wow, that is such a good analogy because, like, with the dinner party, it's all about keeping up a front, you know? But when you find that genuine satisfaction in living in a clean space that you've, put effort into, like, that feels authentic.
Right. That's the key word, authentic. And that's what the article is saying about the gospel message. It's not about just polishing up your behavior on the outside, but about letting the Holy Spirit guide you towards a real heart-level change.
So it's not about checking boxes.
No.
It's about this, like, deep change that affects everything you do.
Exactly.
Okay, so we've got rules over relationship. We've got external actions versus internal transformation. So what's danger number 3? What else does legalism put at risk?
Okay, so this one is kind of a big one, and it can be a little uncomfortable to think about, but it's the danger of hypocrisy.
Oh, wow.
Because when we're all about outward conformity to rules, but we're not focused on that genuine internal change, we're basically creating this breeding ground for hypocrisy.
It's like we're putting on performance, but instead of wanting applause, we're seeking what? God's approval, admiration from other people.
Yeah, it's like you're trying to earn something, right?
Yeah.
But it's just empty.
It just feels so hollow.
Because true fulfillment, true freedom, that comes from aligning our hearts with God, not just our actions. It's about that genuine, heartfelt connection with the divine, not just racking up points.
It's not a game. Okay, so just to recap, we've got these 3 potential pitfalls of legalism. Putting rules before your relationship with God, focusing on outward stuff rather than internal transformation, and then this big one, hypocrisy. And honestly, with all this talk about the downsides of legalism, it's easy to feel kind of, I don't know, disheartened maybe, like discouraged. But
Yeah.
the article doesn't leave us hanging there, does it? There's this like thread of hope woven throughout, and that's the gospel message itself. It does feel like a bit of a breath of fresh air when you get to that part.
Right, because it's not just about pointing out what's wrong, it's about offering a better way.
Exactly. So instead of legalism, we have
The gospel.
the gospel, yeah. And it flips the script entirely. It says, look, you are loved, you are accepted by God, not because you're perfect, not because you followed all the rules, but because of his grace. Amazing grace. Okay, so wait, hold on, back up a sec. Because I think a lot of us, we hear that word grace and we're like, yeah, grace, got it. But what does that actually mean? Like, practically speaking?
You're right, it's easy for these words to lose their meaning.
Totally.
But when we're talking about grace, what we're really saying is that it's not about what we do, it's about what's already been done for us.
Okay.
Through Jesus, his life, his death, his resurrection. It's like this free gift, and we just get to open it.
And the article brings up this super powerful verse from Ephesians. It's 2.8 to 9, and it basically says, you've been saved by grace through faith, not by anything you've done, but by God's gift. And honestly, when you really let that sink in, phew, talk about a weight off your shoulders.
Right. It's like this huge exhale.
Yes.
Because we can finally stop striving, stop trying to earn our way in.
I can just...
Yes. And when we get that, really get it, it changes everything. Our whole perspective shifts.
Okay, so grace. It's the foundation. But how do we actually build our lives on that? How does it play out in the real world, day to day?
Well, the article does a great job of breaking the gospel message down into 3 core parts.
Okay, hit me.
So we've got grace and forgiveness, love and relationship, and then holistic transformation.
Okay, so let's take those one at a time. Grace and forgiveness. What's the article saying about that?
It's basically saying we can ditch this idea that we have to be perfect to be accepted,
Which, let's be real, is such a relief because none of us are.
Exactly. We don't have to be. Jesus, he already bridged the gap, right? He lived the perfect life, took on the consequences for all the ways we mess up so that we could be completely forgiven.
So it's not about constantly trying to be good enough. It's about accepting that forgiveness, that grace that's already there.
Yes. 1,000 times yes.
Okay, wow. All right, what about that second piece? Love and relationship.
So because we're not stuck in that fear of messing up,
Yeah.
of not being good enough,
Yeah.
it frees us up to actually have a relationship with God that's based on love.
not like obligation.
Exactly. The article even mentions how Jesus, he summarized the whole law, like the whole thing, down to 2 commands. Love God and love others.
Yeah.
That's it. No crazy rituals, no impossible checklists, just love.
Which honestly sounds a lot more fun
Right.
than like constantly stressing about whether or not you're doing enough to please God.
Absolutely. And that love it spills over into, every part of our lives.
Yeah.
Which brings us to that third piece, holistic transformation.
Okay, so what does that look like?
It means that the gospel, it's not about these surface level changes,
Right.
It's about partnering with the Holy Spirit and saying, okay, I want to become more loving, more compassionate. I want to be the best, most whole version of myself.
So it's about becoming who you were always meant to be.
Exactly.
Okay, so we've talked about legalism, we've talked about the gospel, this beautiful alternative, but let's circle back to those 10 Commandments displays because that's kind of where we started.
Right, right.
So after all this, after this deep dive, where do we land?
Well, the article makes this really interesting point. It says that without that full context of the gospel, without understanding grace, relationship, transformation, just putting the 10 Commandments up, it could actually do more harm than good.
Because, I mean, it's not like it's the school's job to teach kids the whole gospel message, right? It'd be like trying to teach someone how to swim by just showing them pictures of water. You kind of need the whole experience to really get it.
That is such a good analogy. And it's so true. It's not the school's job. It's not the government's job. It's the church's.
Yeah.
It's our responsibility as believers to live out the gospel, to share it.
To show people what it really means to live a transformed life. Which I think leads us to the question we all need to be asking ourselves, especially as we wrap up this deep dive. If just displaying the rules isn't enough, what are some ways, some effective, engaging, maybe even revolutionary ways that we can share the gospel, the message of grace and transformation with the world around us? I know that's something I'm going to be chewing on for a while, and hopefully you are too. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive, and we'll see you next time.